two little fairies that decided the hedge witch's yard was still their playground were playing with the tan pup. They flew back and forth as she barked and chased them. All three friends seemed to be having the time of their life. The head witch came out to check on her little one and why the pup was barking so much. She was sitting at the patio table playing tea party with her little cousin. The Fae were playing with the pup. She felt better knowing they were okay. She went back inside to fix them something special. She came back out with rosemary and cheese biscuits, grape, strawberry, and plum jelly to go with the honey and ginger tea she made to make it a real tea party. Jaylene put her dolly in the seat next to her. Please help me spread the jelly on my bread, Aunt Mary. She smiled at Mary, happy to have a real tea party. Of course, wild child. She picked up Jaylene's bread and piled the jelly on it like she liked. The jar was not going to last through this party, and she didn't regret it. This is why she made extra. She is going to be so happy she can take some home. Mom, you're the best. This is one of the best tea parties ever. Carmen smiled from ear to ear, enjoying the sunny day with her little cousin and her mom. She set up small pieces of bread with jelly and cut up strawberries. The two little fairies came and ate with them. Soon dusk came. Mary's brother Tim came and got her adorable niece in the jars of homemade jelly. She is going to fall asleep on the way home. You played hard today. He picked up his tired daughter and hugged her tight. She cuddled into her daddy. She had so much fun. The jelly will help with the tummy problems you asked about. Later that evening, suddenly there were screams and yells outside the house. Someone was pounding on the door. Carmen woke up to her mom pulling the blanket back and putting shoes on her feet. She gave her a bag and pulled her out of bed. Down they ran down the hall to the back of, sorry, lost my place for a second. To the back secret entrance at the side of the house. Carmen tried to be as quiet as possible as she crawled through the bushes. She was glad she wore the flannel pajamas with the pants set tonight. It helped with the scratches. She got to the clearing on the other side and ran as fast as she can. She as far away as she could from the angry people. Carmen Carmen ran as fast as she could in the dark trees. After a few near trips in the underbrush, she found the clearing her mom showed her. She could not hear the voices anymore. She only heard the sounds of the insects and animals of the woods. She started going through the messenger bag her mom gave her, a set of clothes, the book, and the supplies for the circle. Her mom was serious about summoning fairies. She got dressed and set up the circle. She carefully drew the sigils. She carefully set the herbs around the circle. As far af- after she was sure she did everything as her mom taught, she recited the chant. Gentle friends of the forest, I humbly ask, help me now. Please protect me. She stood there, breathing, forcing herself to be calm, to believe in her chant. She noticed that the forest was no longer quiet. The bugs started making their sounds. The crickets were loud. The animals started moving again. I think I figured out where I messed up. At least she hoped they were animals moving in the undergrowth of the trees. Even though it was a normal, quiet wood night, everything became so loud. Suddenly, there was a voice from behind her. "Hello, Carmen." The fae from the tea party who drank the orange spice and blackberry tea with her said. Then suddenly she was then suddenly he was towering over her. "What's wrong? Where is your mother? The men from the town took her. She helped get she helped me get out here. She said to do the chant and one of you guys would help me get to Patty. She will take care of me." He looked down at her. After looking her up and down, he took his cloak off and put it around her. It made her very safe. She felt very disheveled. Some of the rips of from before had started bleeding and she had many scratches and scrapes. He grabbed her hand. "Come, little one. We must first see the healer and make a plan to get to her dwelling." "Thank you, Affy," she said quietly as they started walking deeper into the dark forest. The sound that had been so comforting had turned frightening. She saw the deer run a pass run past in the distance. Little creatures were moving and making sounds around her. Her brain was going in so many directions. Was her mom okay? How was she, how was she going to get where she needed to go? Did whatever deal her mother made with the Fae mean she would be safe too? She had lost all track of time. She just knew she hurt and she was scared. She sighed heavily as she watched her feet and her surroundings for branches. The trees stood tall and solid as her world crashed down. She tripped and used the tree to steady herself, and a bug crawled on her hand. "Why did you scream?" Affy asked. His eyes appraised her for new damage. "I didn't know I screamed. Something crawled on my hand and it scared me," she said, breathing hard. "You are fine, little one. The large rock just ahead is the door to her burrow." He pointed his long, slender fingers towards the wide boulder as tall as her and about 6 trees away. She nodded as they began the last part of this trek that felt like about a mile and a half long for her small body. She didn't know fear was so exhausting. After another near fall, she finally made it to the boulder. He reached below the boulder to reveal an opening. He motioned her to enter the dark hole. With no other hope but to listen to her fairy friend, she crawled in far enough for him to join. "Continue on. The light will come on in a few feet." She started crawling deeper into the tunnel. Within a moment, a dim light came on from above. It glowed from above to show the walls were held up by wooden panels. They held 4 scenes of animals on most of them. It was like a work of art from a museum her dad made her go to with her stepmom and step siblings. They crawled for about 3 or 4 minutes when they finally came to a triangle door that was slightly misshapen. There was enough room for them to crouch side by side. He crawled beside her and tapped a pattern that seemed to be a piece of a song she heard before. A couple of moments later, a 3 foot tall woman with long brown hair and the skin of oak opened the door. She gawked at Carmen like she couldn't believe she was there. "Aframel, zin ton tig clong nos?" she said in a highly angry, disbelieving tone. Shen, tin, aber ti kamsa, he said calmly, like this was a normal everyday occurrence. Technically, them being together were. He'd played with her and her dog a lot, but not this situation she was in now. She heaved a large sigh, motioned them to enter as she walked back in the door. "Follow Calypso, little one," he said as he crawled in. She followed him inside and gently shut the door. The roof was about a foot taller than the tunnel. It was a bit more comfortable. It was so homey and cozy. The chairs and the couch were covered in what looked like cushions and a couple of blankets. The shelves held books and other trinkets that were a mix of things from the forest and things that were entirely human. It smelt of fruits and herbs. "Are you a gnome?" she blurted out before she could stop herself. "Yes, little miss. Why are your clothes ripped?" She looked her up and down. Carmen realized she was bleeding when she looked at what Calypso saw: ripped, dirt covered jeans and blood stains in places on the legs. "I crawled under my house to the bushes beside the house, then I ran into the forest to get away from the men who took my mother," she explained. Calypso looked rather alarmed. "Fichten saw?" she asked, looking at Aframel. He shook his head no. His face was unreadable. She sighed and looked back at Carmen. "Let's get you cleaned up. Then we shall get some tea." She led Carmen through the kitchen into a hallway to another room, leaving the cloak on a chair as they went past. With an herb solution, she cleaned up her legs. Carmen winced and tried not to move. From the smell, she could tell she was staving off infection and sanitizing her wounds. She found some comfortable clothes that fit Carmen well. They were a soft pelt-like material. I seem to have okay. I thought I blooped out, so I was checking. Um, and I lost where I was. Sorry. They were a
Felt like
soft pelt-like material. She led her back to the kitchen where Affy was waiting at the table in a chair with his cloak. He smiled at his friend. She joined him at the table. Calypso went to the hearth and got some boiling water and took the food from a pot and made them in both a plate with wooden utensils. She set the plates in front of them. She smiled at Carmen. Carmen smiled. "Thank you." She had not realized she was hungry until she saw the potatoes, mushrooms, and herbs. Affy nodded, and Calypso nodded back at them and walked back to the hearth. She poured the contents from the boiling pot in 3 mugs and the rest into small bottles of some brown material. She brought the mugs and joined them at the table. "Jinta tief tin bang fim nas?" she asked. They began talking in that odd language. The only word she understood was Patty. That gave her hope. She drank her tea and listened to the merrily sing-song language and dozed off at the table. She woke up in the morning in a room covered up in a comfortable bed. Nothing hurt anymore and she was safe. She got up and wandered down the hallway until she found her way back to the kitchen. She found both friends at the table. Calypso continued her conversation with Affy as she made her some of the fresh fruit and potato dish and poured her a cup of tea concoction. She enjoyed the yummy concoctions and waited for them to talk to her. Little one, I have talked to different folk and creatures about the path between here and your Patty. No humans have been seen this deep in the forest to her dwelling. It appears to be a good day to travel. Affy started filling her in. Pardon me. I have made you more Tantuzi for your trip, Calypso said. She and Affy gathered different supplies into a bag she made. They talked in an odd language as they made sure they were ready to head out. It's time to go, little one, Affy said. Thank you so much, she said to Calypso. She hugged her, having to bend down a little. They crawled back into the morning sunlight. They made sure the door was covered back up. Luckily for her, Affy seemed to know the way. She had no idea where she would need to go if she were alone. They began their trek quietly as she didn't know which question to ask first. In the daylight, it was far easier to walk and not trip. The beautiful wildlife no longer scared her. She enjoyed the deer in the distance. Squirrels and other creatures walked, scurried, or ran past. The bugs weren't her favorite thing, but they stayed to themselves. Time passed slowly as they walked. A song wafted on the wind, sounding almost eerie. It was a beautiful sound. As they approached, getting closer to the sound, Affy grabbed her hand. He looked down at her pointedly. He put a finger on his lips. She nodded. He took a deep breath and held it, and she did the same. The five fairies were circling a small green plant. It glowed soft green with yellow around the edges. It was beautiful and mesmerizing. Affy kept his gaze forward and the pace the same, almost pulling her forward. When they were out of sight of the circling Fae, he let go of her hand. She exhaled and took a deep breath. She did the same. You must not interrupt when the others talk to Earth Mother. Yes, Affy, their song and the glow was beautiful, she replied. That it is, little one. They fell back into a comfortable silence as they walked. Her eyes started side to side as the little creatures moved in the underbrush. The sun was slowly moving in the sky as time slowly crawled by. To her right, there was a big thud. Something big came running in their direction. She grabbed Affy's arm and pulled back as she stepped out of the way. The biggest deer she ever saw nearly hit them as it ran past. Dag nabbit! A gnome said loudly. She was surprised by the human term. They walked closer to see what happened. The gnome appeared to be okay. A wheel had come off the wagon he was driving. They found the gnome giving his odd furry companion that was pulling the wagon a good once over. She could not understand anything that he was murmuring to it as he petted it. He couldn't. He looked up at them as he stood back. That darn deer hit my cart, he says in an odd accent she couldn't place. Affy nodded in response and walked around the cart to survey the damage. He walked back around and pushed the wheel into standing to examine it. He knelt down on one knee to examine the spoke it came off of. The gnome came over to see what he was seeing. It's not broken, Horfitz. Do you have supplies to fix it? He asked his friend. She didn't realize he would know so many people. Da. Horfitz shook his head yes. He walked to the back of the tilted cart and rummaged through his things. A couple of minutes later, had a mallet, some wooden pieces, and a rope. We will hold the cart up, Affy offered for further help. Miss Shone, Horfus thanked them. Affy laid the wheel against the side of the cart and grabbed the front of the cart by the wheel. Carmen walked to the other side and grabbed the other side to lift. The furry creature chittered a little but stayed still. On three, little one. She nodded in agreement. 1, 2, 3, he counted. They stood up as far as they could with the loaded cart. Horfus, with the practice of years, definitely put the wheel in place and attached it. Within 5 minutes, it was done. "'Tis done. Luck. Tizzy is all right," he said, looking at the furry creature fondly. "I am glad your furry companion is safe." Affy smiled at his friend. "Are there any other repairs you can see need done?" Horfus walked around the cart once more. Carmen stepped out of the way so he could see the whole thing. "'Tis good, my Finn. Michonne, to you and Our pleasure, friend." Affy and Carmen nodded. It'll be off. Good luck on your Ernie," he said as he climbed on the creature. "Michonne," Affy replied. "Ch, ch, ch, ch," Horfus said to the creature, and it started walking. Affy looked around his feet and sat down. "Let's have a meal. I am hungry, little one." She smiled. "Me too. It's already been a long day." She was exhausted. She walked over to him and looked around the ground for any unpleasant things to sit on. Seeing nothing, she joined him. "You seem to know everything that goes on in the forest," she observed. "I have been here for 157 years of your years. I made a few friends. I don't like being bored," he replied as he pulled out the odd-shaped bottles Calypso made them last night and leaf-wrapped burrito-looking things. He handed her a bottle and two of the leaf things, pulled the top leaf off and took a bite. She set the second one on her leg and did the same. It was delicious, packed with mushrooms, nuts, and dried fruits. She closed her eyes and said, "Mmm." "I agree, little one. Calypso is wonderful at making food taste that way. It's something I look forward to every time I see her." "How much longer do you think?" she asked. She has tried hard not to flood Affy with all her questions. As much as she trusts him to stick to his word, she did not want to annoy him. It's a bad idea to upset a fairy, but she had to ask too. 2 or 3 hours, I believe. You have been extremely quiet, he observed. "I don't want to annoy you with 1.5 million questions, but I do need to ask two, or I will go out of my mind." "Did you hear anything about my mom being alive?" she asked with great anxiety. "No, I didn't. Not until we reached Patty's home. I will continue to keep you safe," he promised. "Thank you," she nodded. She sifted through the others, trying to decide if they were prying. They seemed to be a whole lot of none of her business, so she finished her food and enjoyed the feeling the tea gave her as it eased her pain from the trek through the woods. Will we still be friends after we get to Aunt Patty's?" She wondered if those who hated her family because they misunderstood what they actually do ruined her friendship. "Of course, little one. I hope to play with your little ones. Your tea parties are delicious." He smiled at her genuinely. She was relieved. A little bit of the weight lifted from her shoulders. She is safe from the Fae. Her only worry is those bad men. She started thinking about what may be ahead on the journey, what other creatures or Fae they may meet or see. He startled her out of her thoughts. Are we ready? Sh- She nodded yes as he handed him the um, empty bottles. The leaves would fertilize where they lay. She stood up and wiped her hands on her pants. He stood, put the bag on and did the same. She smiled because he looked so elegant in this form. The thought he would have the same habits as she amused her. He glanced around, turned a bit to the left, and started walking. She fell and stepped beside him. She continued to look around in the forest. It was starting to change in the fall. The leaves had started to change. It was a pretty mix with the greens. She wondered about the types of games the Fae children would play. Hide and seek is a good one with in the wooden areas. What about the ball? How would they make one? Suddenly, something hit her leg. It stung a bit. She picked it up. Seemed to be an acorn with leaves tied around it with grass. She handed it to Affy. As he peered at it, a young fairy flew over and stopped once it saw she was a human. Shan, okay, Malhun, Affy told the little one as he walked closer, his hand out flat, holding the ball. She stayed put. He got closer and tossed it. The little one caught it. Michonne, it said, excited, and flew off. After she was sure the small fairy was gone, he said, let's continue. They started walking again. In what seemed to be an hour later, they were hearing loud, angry voices. Two of them sounded like Tim and Patty. Carmen's feet seemed to have a mind of their own. They bolted towards the sound. In a short time, she saw the back of Patty's house, the wraparound porch and picnic table. She cut to the left around the right of the chicken coop. Close to the porch that was to the left of the house, she made it just to the edge of the house up front. Tim was mad. He had a rifle pointed at the same men from last night. A dwarf she knew was beside Tim with a large hammer ready to swing. Patty stood on the other side. We came to make her pay for being a witch. Give her back. Never. She helped your child, so you plan on punishing her? He seemed to have had enough. He put a warning shot in the side of the rusty red truck they came in. It spooked them. They ran to the truck. This isn't over, the driver yelled as they peeled off. Tim lowered his gun. He and Patty seemed to notice them at the same time. They nearly ran at her. He picked her up and hugged her as Patty hugged her back. She heard the front screen door open and shut. Her bruised mom cried, Thank the goddess you're safe. Thank you, Aframel. My pleasure, he replied. Tim set her down and she ran to her mom. They ended up sitting on the ground, hugging and crying. They both were safe.